Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron. President Obama addresses the UN General Assembly today, just one day after the U.S.-led coalition launched airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. On Tuesday, the president met with representatives of the 5 Arab nation coalition that supported the attacks. As CBN News' Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, it may be the beginning of a long campaign against the Islamic State.
President Obama met with the representatives at a United Nations meeting.
Well, it is a wonderful opportunity for me to welcome these leaders, friends, partners from the region, and to say thank you to all of them for their participation and commitment to rolling back the violent extremism that has so disrupted Iraq and Syria and threatens the region as a whole.
The Pentagon briefed Israeli officials before the attacks and said their initial assessments indicated the strikes were successful. The targets included the Islamic State and a less well-known group of al-Qaeda veterans called Khorasan, near the Syrian city of Aleppo. The Pentagon said the group was planning attacks against U.S. airplanes.
We've been watching this group closely for some time. We believe the Khorasan group was nearing the execution phase of an attack either in Europe or the homeland. We know that the Khorasan group has attempted to recruit Westerners to serve as operatives or to infiltrate back into their homelands.
Some Republicans supported the attacks, but do have concerns about the coalition.
Even though these allies really play both sides, because there have been a lot of reports about Qatar especially financing ISIL, and Qatar is the home of Al Jazeera that's always broadcasting very anti-American and interviews, and that's their focus. So at least they're protecting both sides. I'm not in favor of that. They should be solidly with us, but hats off to them for participating. All of these countries have a lot at stake if this terrorist group keeps expanding. So I support the president. I wish that we had started it earlier.
Ross Leitonen added that the fight against terrorism is the new normal. In the meantime, an estimated 140,000 Kurdish refugees have fled into Turkey after another onslaught by the Islamic State.
The war is going now. IS is attacking Kurdish villages. We were in a village and we went to the next village, they attacked it. We went to another village and they attacked it too. Then we went to the city. The people in the city fled too. They said they are heading to Kobani. After that, we came to the border and passed over here.
These refugees are some of the latest victims of the Islamic State. Now that an air campaign has begun, many in the region hope it will help roll back the scourge of this barbaric group. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
A controversial Arab Christian from Nazareth also addresses the UN today. Father Gabriel Nadav is a Greek Orthodox priest and leader of a church in Yafia near Nazareth. He's been outspoken about Muslim persecution of Christians in the Arab world and will testify about the state of Christian minorities there. He's been denounced by Arab members of Israel's parliament for encouraging Arab Christians to become part of Israeli society. And the Greek Orthodox Patriarch has banned him from Nazareth's Basilica for his public statements about the treatment of Christians in the Arab world. Australian police shot dead a suspected terrorist after he stabbed and injured 2 police officers yesterday. Police say the unnamed man was a person of interest and had his passport canceled on grounds of national security. The 18-year-old man carried out the attack after he was asked to answer questions at a Melbourne police station.
Obviously, this indicates that there are people in our community who are capable of very extreme acts. It also indicates that the police will be constantly vigilant to protect us against people who would do us harm.
Some experts suspect that the attack was prompted by ISIS calling on supporters in other countries to wage war wherever they are. Radical Muslim preacher Abu Qatada has been acquitted on terrorism charges of plotting attacks against Americans and Israelis. A military court in Jordan acquitted him based on the lack of convincing charges on him. Qatada, described as a one-time lieutenant of Osama bin Laden, is known for his fiery pro-Al-Qaeda speeches, but he's also spoken out against the ISIS terrorist group. He was also charged with involvement in plans to target Israeli and American tourists and Western diplomats in Jordan in 2000. In a separate case in June, Qatada was acquitted of a foiled 1999 plan to attack an American school in Amman. Well, climate change is another big topic on the UN agenda this week. Tuesday, President Obama told the General Assembly that the U.S. will do its part to combat climate change. But some are charging that there is no evidence the Earth is facing a climate catastrophe. Dale Hurd has the story.
President Obama was the headliner at a marathon session of world leaders who promised to spend billions of dollars to fight climate change.
There's one issue that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any other, and that is the urgent and growing threat of a changing climate.
The president's words reflected the views of most Democrats who, according to one poll, view climate change as a bigger threat than the Islamic State. The president pledged to sign an executive order requiring the U.S. government consider climate change when investing in poor nations.
And I'm announcing a new effort to deploy the unique scientific and technological capabilities of the United States, from climate data to early warning systems.
All of which will cost American taxpayers a lot of money. Missing from the president's speech was the growing view that climate change is not a serious threat, that the Earth stopped warming 18 years ago, that catastrophic weather events have been less frequent, and that Antarctic ice continues to grow and not shrink.
What it really shows is that climate and weather are much more variable than our computer models said they were, and it also shows that it's probably not going to warm up as much as it was forecast to.
This week has seen protests around the world for politicians to act decisively to stop climate change. Thousands marched in New York, and it was a march that featured a deep hatred of capitalism and some very strange views.
Essentially, we're embodying the energies of the ocean, and the ocean is very synonymous also with the energy of water that also resides in the body.
Zen Buddhism concerns itself with beings, with all beings, not just human beings, but all beings.
It's all about balance, and spirituality is connected to the earth. We honor the earth and everything about it, all the elements and spirit.
The polar bear bears a disproportionate burden, so the polar bear is having a voice here as part of the march.
It's a pagan religion.
French philosopher Pascal Bruckner has written The Fanaticism of the Apocalypse. He likens the climate change crowd to a religious cult.
Because it uses all the elements of traditional religion, especially the theme of the apocalypse. You have this culture of fear. You have sinned, now you have to be punished.
But it's still not certain anything will come out of this climate summit. China, the world's biggest polluter, already wants an exemption to keep on emitting carbon, and several world leaders simply didn't show up. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
It's a big week at the United Nations, with leaders also addressing the Ebola crisis in West Africa. Tuesday, U.S. health officials laid out the worst and best case scenarios of the outbreak. The Center for Disease Control says the number of infected people could explode to 1.4 million by mid-January. But fast, aggressive action could keep those numbers far lower. About 5,800 people have been infected and some 2,800 have died since the first cases were reported 6 months ago. A federal judge sentenced conservative author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza to 8 months community confinement and 5 years probation after he pled guilty to federal campaign fraud. D'Souza, the former president of the Christian school King's College, was also ordered to undergo counseling and to teach English during his probation. D'Souza made the film 2016, Obama's America, which predicted dire consequences if the president was reelected. After his sentencing, he posted this on his Facebook page. "A great calm comes over me when I remind myself that there is a higher power that is sovereign and remains in charge." Well, students across the country are gathering around school flagpoles today to pray, continuing the See You at the Pole tradition. The event is an opportunity for students to connect at the beginning of the school year and pray for their classmates, their schools, and the nation. The gatherings are constitutionally permissible at public schools because they're student-led and take place outside of class time, usually before school starts. Now, in its third decade, the annual event on thousands of campuses nationwide attract more than 1 million students each year. Coming up, the church and mental health. Is it safe to talk about your psychological struggles in church?
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
There are calls for the head of the FDA to resign amid charges that agency policies have helped cause a crisis of addiction to painkillers. Deaths linked to the addictive medications, including OxyContin and Vicodin, have more than tripled over the last 20 years. And now, for the first time officially, anti-addiction activists are calling for the head of the Food and Drug Administration to step down. They're saying Dr. Margaret Hamburg and FDA policies that she's allowed have aided in a national epidemic of prescription painkiller abuse. The letter addressed to Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell says, quote, "We are especially frustrated by the FDA's continued approval of new, dangerous, high-dose opiate analgesics that are fueling high rates of addiction and overdose deaths." The Department of Health and Human Services says that Burwell is focused on this very serious issue. Well, new research shows churches are not talking openly about mental illness and have often no ministries in place to help those who are struggling. Nashville-based Lifeway Research recently surveyed 1,000 senior Protestant pastors and found 2/3 seldom speak to their congregations about mental illness. More than half of those with mental illness and 2/3 of family members of those suffering want the church to talk about it so it won't be seen as taboo. Their survey also found most churches are not prepared to help. Only about 1/4 of churches have a plan to assist families affected by mental illness. Ed Setzer is president of Lifeway Research and lead pastor at Grace Church in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Our recently CBN's Mark Martin asked him about the church's approach to mental health.
People in church talk about cancer, heart attacks, and other health conditions all the time, but this survey shows pastors rarely speak about mental illness. What's going on?
Well, I think part of it is the stigma that's attached to mental illness, and perhaps even particularly in the church. We found that in our research that of the Protestant pastors we polled, 66% spoke to their congregation about the issue of mental health or mental illness once a year, rarely, or never. So that's the vast majority. Yet, most studies say that about 1 in 4 people will suffer or struggle with mental illness in a given year. And so if 1 out of 4 people in your church were going to struggle with cancer, I'm pretty sure you'd have a regular series that dealt with that issue. And so we see a great challenge that churches have got to talk about this to end the stigma and help people find help and really the ministry that they need to be found and rooted in the local church.
Now, I understand you also found that many people struggling with mental illness and their family members want the church to talk openly about it. Did that surprise you?
It did. Well, the contrast surprised us. On the one hand, you have 66% who pretty much once a year, rarely or never speak on the issue. And yet there were 2 other samples that we surveyed in the study. One of them was were family members who struggle with mental illness, of those who struggle with mental illness, and then actually people who struggle with mental illness. And strong majorities in both. 65% of the family members said they wanted the church to talk more. 59% of those who struggle with mental illness want to talk more. And when it comes to pastors, sermons break stigmas. When you're talking about something, teaching about it, teaching what the Word of God says about the need for exhortation and spiritual help and encouragement, but also letting people know that mental illness is just that. It's an illness. It's not a sin to be sick, and to recognize that there are help helpful means and practitioners outside of the church that can partner with the church to assist those struggling with mental illness.
This next stat I found disturbing. You found that only a quarter of churches have a plan to actually help families dealing with mental illness. Why do you think so few do?
Well, what's interesting, when we actually surveyed the family members of those who struggle with mental illness, they thought it was even less than that. So the pastors said that there was a plan, but the people maybe aren't so aware of the plan. I think that part of the reason is that sometimes the church doesn't think it's its role to be involved in this. That's the medical professionals, but it's not. These are our family members. These are our friends. These are the children or the adults of people or people in our congregations. So what I would say is don't be afraid to own the reality that mental illness is real, present, and prevalent in the church, and to find ways to minister, to have ministries. Support groups can be there. We can even when we're working with medical professionals in severe acute mental illness, we don't just outsource these people and abdicate our responsibility, but we're part of the process to wholeness and healing that's so important and so necessary.
Right. Churches are like a hospital, and to me that includes mental illness as well. Well, what can churches do to start the conversation and begin to think about ministry in this area?
Well, one of the things that this project was actually co-sponsored by Focus on the Family, and if they're interested, they could go to thrivingpastor.com/mental health, and there's a brand new resource that they've just developed and other resources that'll assist churches and pastors to create more effective ministries. Most obviously, I would say talk about the issue. Let's not make it taboo. Let's talk about it. Let's move that 66% number in the downward direction with more people talking about how the gospel shapes and changes every area of our life, how mental illness is a sickness, and much like we go to the doctor for a broken leg, we can go to the doctor for mental illness if there's a need to do so. But let's also not isolate ourselves as the church. Let's be a part of a community of care that includes caring people that ultimately can lead to greater health and wholeness and really ministry. It's a great area of ministry. Pastors and church leaders who are watching, there's a lot of hurting people who need you to show and share the love of Jesus in a broken and lost situation, and what an opportunity for us to do so.
Amen. Dr. Ed Stetzer of Lifeway Research, thank you, sir, for your time today.
Thank you.
Up next, the Navy SEAL who took out 4 al-Qaeda leaders while being shot 27 times himself. See how God answered his prayer after this. Welcome back to CBN News Today. Navy SEAL Mike Day had never been shot until one night in April of 2007. Al-Qaeda terrorists opened fire on Day, hitting him more than 24 times. Mark Martin brings us the miraculous story of his survival.
This body armor took more rounds than it was supposed to.
Body armor capable of handling only one round took multiple hits at close range and held together.
They advertise that it can take one round and that it falls apart to the point where they say that it's not supposed to stop any more projectiles. And this whole gunfight was inside of 10 feet.
Retired Navy SEAL Senior Chief Mike Day says any one of these rounds should have killed him.
Just another sign that, I shouldn't have survived it. What you're looking at here is not supposed to have been able to happen.
And that's just one part of the miracle. On the night of April 6th, 2007, in Iraq's Anbar province, Day's team of Navy SEALs and Iraqi scouts were on the hunt for a high-level al-Qaeda cell. Day says the terrorists had shot down 2 helicopters, killing everyone on board. Being the first to enter a 12-by-12 room where 4 al-Qaeda leaders waited to strike proved to be almost deadly for Day.
Upon entering that doorway, they all just opened up on me. It felt like somebody was just beating me up with sledgehammers. After I figured out I was getting shot, I said, God, get me home to my girls. That was my first prayer to God, real prayer. He answered it.
A prayer to be reunited with his wife and daughters. When the gunfight was over, Mike Day took out all 4 terrorists in the room, but not before being shot 27 times and hit with grenade shrapnel.
And people hear about my story, and they can't believe it. I was there, and I can't believe it. I got shot 27 times, 16 in the body and 11 times in my body armor. I was shot in both legs, both arms, my abdomen. You throw a finger on me, anything but my head, I got shot there. I've kind of speculated the reason why I didn't die is because, maybe I wouldn't have gone to heaven.
Miraculously, he cleared the rest of the house before walking on his own to the helicopter, which flew him to safety. His bravery did not go unnoticed. Mike is a highly decorated veteran. You can see all the medals he's been awarded over the years, including the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. He served in the Navy for more than 21 years, 20 of those as a Navy SEAL. While in the hospital, the Navy SEAL lost 55 pounds in 2 weeks. He says it took around 2 years to physically recover from his injuries, although he still deals with constant pain. Like so many veterans, doctors diagnosed Day with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and traumatic brain injury, the invisible wounds of war.
You lose a leg, you lose a leg. It's a limb. You smash that brain around a little bit, and who you are changes.
Day is determined to not have a victim mentality, and that has launched him on a journey of giving back. The retired Navy SEAL is now a full-time wounded warrior advocate for the Special Operations Command.
My job is to improve their situation, whether it's make sure they get all their benefits, make sure they get the best medical care.
Advocating also involves raising funds for treatment programs at the Cleric Brain Center in Texas. Mike's definitely not one to take the easy way out. For the fundraiser, he's taking part in a half Ironman triathlon. Get this, that's more than 70 miles of swimming, running, and biking. His goal is to raise $75,000 to send wounded brothers and sisters, both military and civilian, to the Cleric Brain Center. Why do you think God kept you alive?
To do what I'm doing now.
And so the life of service continues, from a man who is a walking, more like swimming, biking, and running miracle. Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
Finally today, CBN's Superbook is a big hit in Indonesia and Myanmar. In addition to airing on TV, Superbook events are being held in schools, malls, and as part of humanitarian outreaches. Over 500 children attended a Superbook event in Indonesia where they watched the David and Goliath episode. That episode was also shown to approximately 230 village children in Myanmar. After the episode ended, all the children at both events were invited to accept Jesus into their hearts. The children were encouraged to be their best, pursue excellence, and dream big. And that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We hope you join us next time. Have a great day. God bless.